Greetings and welcome to this review of the September 2023 Visa Bulletin. My name is Chad Graham with the law firm of Graham Adair. Now, before we jump into the specifics, I want to make it clear that this video is not just simply a review of the September Visa Bulletin. We're going to be looking at recent data. We're going to be looking at trends to see if we can anticipate what's coming up in October and on into the near future. As most of you know, the September Visa Bulletin marks the end of the government's fiscal year. That's the last Visa Bulletin for 2023. The new government fiscal year starts on October 1st, and so the October Visa Bulletin is often highly anticipated. So we want to dig in a little bit, see if we can see what's coming, and potentially make some predictions. Let's start with a review of the last 13 months of data that we've distilled down into these nice little graphs that show you some trend lines and hopefully give you a sense of where things have been and where they might be going. All right, let's start with India. EB1 is the gray line, EB2 green, and EB3 black. If you follow the gray EB1 line, you can see that it was current for several months and then dropped back about 6 months and has remained at that level. Really, as dates stay the same from month to month, it means retrogression is actually increasing. Otherwise, it would move forward a month with every new Visa Bulletin. Then at the end of the year, EB1 India took a huge dive. This is basically the State Department turning off the flow of new EB1 India cases for the year. EB2 India took a 2-year drop at the beginning of the year and then has remained fairly flat through the rest of the year. EB3 India took a similar drop at the beginning of the year, stayed mostly flat, and then just took another dive. Again, this is the State Department essentially stopping the flow of new EB3 India cases for the rest of the year. Okay, on to China. EB1 China stayed mostly flat all year with a small drop about mid-year. EB2 was flat all year, basically increasing retrogression by 30 days every Visa Bulletin. And EB3 China saw a nice jump at the start of last fiscal year and then stayed mostly flat the rest of the year. Now looking at the rest of the world, EB1 was current most of the year until last month. EB2 declined steadily through the year and has ended up retrogressed by about 1.5 years, and EB3 had a steep decline starting about 6 months ago, and the faucet has basically been turned off for the rest of the fiscal year. Now before we get to any predictions, let's take a quick look at how these retrogression numbers come to be. This chart shows the total number of immigrant petitions or green cards issued during the past 10 years, with a peak in 2016 of nearly 618,000 and a low during the pandemic of just over 240,000. However, only a relatively small portion of these numbers are allocated for employment-based green cards, 140,000 to be exact, plus any rollover from unused family categories from the previous year. Family-based immigrant visas are capped at 226,000 annually. EB1, EB2, and EB3 categories received 28.6% of the total annual limit each, and EB4 and EB5 each received 7.1%. No country is allowed to receive more than 7% of the overall immigrant visas, which is why we see retrogression in India and China specifically. As you can see, unused numbers during the pandemic have been rolled forward and likely helped keep dates from retrogressing significantly. The concern is as those rollover numbers dwindle, will we see bigger drops in future Visa Bulletins? Okay, now on to some predictions. This isn't legal advice, so please don't take any actions based on what I think might happen in October. This is really to give you some visibility to the process and hopefully help you have a better sense of what's going on. I think it's helpful to look at the changeover months, so September of the previous fiscal year and October of the next year to compare those months. There's a sense that the October Visa Bulletin is always advantageous because we receive the new allocation of immigrant visa numbers, but as you'll see, that is often not the case. Okay, let's start with 2020. Most categories nudged up a few months. The biggest jump was EB3 worldwide, which jumped 6 months, basically going from retrogressed back to current. In 2021, on the other hand, we saw no forward movement from September to October. Most categories de facto retrogressed 30 days because the listed dates stayed the same. Last year was a mix with EB2 India taking a big dive of almost 2 years, while EB3 India actually moved forward 45 days. Okay, now for this year. I think a lot of categories that saw significant reductions toward the end of the year will return to being current again. I think we'll see some forward movement for China and basically holding steady for India. So that's what I think we'll see in the next Visa Bulletin, but only time will tell. You'll have to tune in next month to see how close I was. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.